seconds.
I believe so.
So that's what I do. I run up hills. And I've got this great little circuit I do here. My first run is up to where the canal is. And then I run, and then I do my recovery. And they have discovered that recovery time, you might feel like stopping and getting your breath, but they found that the recovery time is more effective if you do something light. So I just walk. And I might do my arms, 10 this way, 10 that way, 10 that way, 10 that way. So I do light. And then when my breathing is back to normal and my brain starts to consider another one, did you hear that? That's why you're the doctor. How long will it take? It differs from person to person. But what Doug McGuff suggests is 60 seconds. Some people will take a little bit more than a minute and a half to get their breathing and their heart rate back down a little bit. And then I do another run, and then I cross this bridge. And then because on the other side, there's a little rise. And when you got a rise, you can get high intensity really easy. And then I come back and I stay on the other side and I get another rise, and I work out I'm probably getting about 5, cycle of 5. But you do the maths on this. What's the maths on that? Would that be, well, let's be generous and say 15 minutes. And that's giving you a little bit more time recovering. Now, can you see why, excuse me, I found it so exciting? Because instead of half an hour in the morning, I only have to do 15 minutes. I'm a very busy lady. Excuse me. So your high intensity is your choice. It's actually what works for you. A lot of the research on this high intensity interval training has been done on exercise bikes, because especially if someone's a little bit unsteady on their feet, they're holding on. If ankle, knee or hip aren't working really well, they can get a really good workout. If someone has varicose veins, they should never run. They've got to be careful because the jarring of the running can intensify the pressure on the venous system. It might be rebounding. We'll look at rebounding a little bit more in a minute. That is the perfect exercise for someone with varicose veins, because you have a second heart. In fact, I was in a meeting listening to Dr. Jonathan Gibbs one day, and everyone was getting a little bit sleepy, and he said, "Barbara, show us the second heart." We all stood up and I went like this. Your second heart is your calf muscle. And your calf muscle pumps your venous system. So someone with varicose veins, the best exercise for them is something that will pump that venous system using their second heart, but not the jarring of the running. And by the way, have you watched children run? Do they run on their heels or their toes? They always run on their toes. And if you were to run outside barefoot, you will never run on your heel. Your body will not let you. You run on your toes. And so what's happened is joggers have been invented that are all padded to encourage people to heel strike. There's a book called Born to Run by Dr. Christopher McDougall. Fascinating book. This guy was a runner. He was always getting lower back and hamstring problems. So he decided to take, I think, 6 months off, travel the world interviewing runners. And he found some barefoot runners. And these barefoot runners never have lower back problems. They never have hamstring problems. And as he investigated, he realised they're toe strikers. And then in the history, he found in the 1960 and 1964 Olympic Games, there was an African runner who took home gold. I can see some smiles. Abibi Bikila. Nike and Reebok hate this guy. He was a barefoot runner. Now, what came out of this book is the barefoot runners. And you can go into the shop today and buy barefoot runners. I have some barefoot runners, and oh, how I love them. In fact, what you can do is the heel and the toe just can squish like that. They're really thin sole. And I love them because you just spring in them. But you always strike with your toe. So if you're a runner, make sure you're a toe striker. Now, when I read this book, the next week I went out and bought some Barefoot runners. But I had a look, and man, they're $200. Nike and Reebok have got on the bandwagon, and they're still, you think, oh, they'll be much cheaper because they're so thin-soled. So I actually searched around and I found some. You want the toe and the heel to be able to touch, and the sole is very thin. So I started using my Barefoot runners. And over the next couple of days, I had very sore legs. Now, what does that tell you? You're using totally different muscles when you toe strike compared to when you heel strike. And Christopher McDougall, as he's exploring this, that's what he discovered. All the toe strike runners, all the Barefoot runners, no pelvic problems, no lower back problems, no hamstring problems, because they're running the way God designed the human body to run. He goes a little bit further. There's a fair bit in the book about evolution, which I find frustrating. I speed read, and when it gets to the evolution stuff, I speed read through it. And then it was interesting, he went on about evolution and all that sort of stuff. And then he said, the toe is an incredible design. And I thought, make up your mind, mate. You cannot say anything else. It's an incredible design. The ball of the foot and the toes are designed to take the weight. The heel is not. That's why if you barefoot run, your body will not let you heel strike. Look at the way children run. They all run on their toes. So if you're a runner, toe strike. And if you've just bought some new padded joggers, well, just toe strike, and next time go for your barefoots. And I can assure you, you'll never go back to the padded ones again, because they're just so light and delightful to run in. They might not like these rocky roads too much, but when I run, I'm watching where my feet go, and that's why most of mine is on the other side of the canal where there's grass. And then it's easier. And I much prefer running on the earth rather than on the hard tar and the hard cement. So runners who run with their heel strike on the cement and on the tar, they're asking for problems lower back. And we've got to look after that lower back. Isn't that true? Your recovery time is your indicator of your fitness. In his book Pace, Dr. Al Sears, he quotes this lady who did 7 seconds high intensity and she took 15 minutes to recover. I tell you that story because if you take 14 minutes, well, you're doing well. And basically, why do I say you're doing well? Because you're better than the 15 minutes. And that's why it's good to do a diary, or we call it journal today, is that right? Of your case. And note your recovery time today. Because as the days and the weeks go by, your recovery time will get less and less and less. That's the good news. But what I'm ever grateful to Doug McGuff for is he takes you into the cell and he shows you, where's my why? He shows you why the high intensity interval training is the most powerful form of exercise today. You'll find most trainers, that's how they're training their athletes today, is the interval training. Even if they're going to be doing a triathlon, even if they're going to be doing a 10K run, the way to train for that is this. And this actually gives more power when it comes time to that long event. Dr. Michael Mosley, he wrote the book Fast Diet. We've talked about the time-restricted eating and the intermittent fasting, which you'll find in Dr. Michael Mosley's book, The Fast Diet. He's written another book, and it's called Fast Exercise. So that's another author. You'll find a lot of authors now on exercise are talking about the high-intensity interval training, and he gives an interesting story about a young guy who was always the top athlete in school, and he got into medicine. A lot of study in medicine. And in the university, the yearly games were coming up. And his friends were saying, you're not coming to training, aren't you going in the event? He said, I just don't have time. I have so much study to do. And what he would do when he was studying, he'd start to get tired, he'd jump up, run out to the oval and run as fast as he could round the oval and come back and sit down and go back to his studies. Sometimes he'd do it every half hour, sometimes he'd do it every hour. And the games were coming up and he just couldn't help himself, he put his name down. And his mate said, "What you put your name down for? You're not even training." He says, "I know, but I just love it so much. I'm going to give it a whirl." He won the race. He didn't realise that he was actually doing the high intensity interval training in his burst round the oval just to try and keep his mind awake. And by the way, it's the best thing to do if you're studying. Just run up and down stairs. Just imagine if every office got all their workers to run up and down stairs every hour for even 30 seconds. So let's go inside the cell. We'll draw up our cell. The glucose goes in, and remember, it goes in under the action of insulin. It goes through a 20-step pathway, and the 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy. The end result of the 20-step pathway is the chemical form of glucose called pyruvate, and pyruvate, as the chemical form of glucose, gets fed into the 8-step pathway, often called the powerhouse because of its ability to give us 36 units of energy. And remember, we looked at the fact that this 8-step pathway is an aerobic pathway, meaning it uses oxygen. This is the anaerobic pathway, because the anaerobic pathway, it produces energy by the process of fermentation. We also looked at the fact that in our muscle cells there is the glycogen stores, quick release glucose stores. I hear some climbed the hill this morning, is that right? Mm-hmm. So the glycogen stores were well used. And then we've got, remember, on the high carbohydrate diet, when that's utilised, the glycogen stores are full, then the excess glucose goes and sits as fat. Well, I want to show you now how the high intensity interval training is the most powerful way to turn that around. So let's look at what happens in our energy cycles when we're doing the 30 seconds high intensity. 20 steps speeds up, we're not surprised. 8 step speeds up, we're not surprised. But this 20-step pathway is a very fast pathway. It consumes huge amounts of glucose. That explains why. That's where the cancer cell runs. That's where the fungus cells run. They don't want oxygen, and they consume huge amounts of glucose, but they only give that much energy. This pathway is a slow pathway. When you start running up hills or bounding on the rebounder or on the exercise bike, your 20 step speeds up and your 8 step speeds up. Now, there's a rate setting enzyme in there that will always keep that one faster and that one slower. So when you're running or rebounding or exercise bike, you're going to be making more pyruvate that can be fed into the 8 step. Because of the fastness of it, you're now producing more that can be fed into the 8 step. And so now the body stores it as lactic acid. We've all heard of lactic acid, yes? Mm-hmm. I think the most exciting part of this whole presentation is what I'm about to tell you. When you're in recovery time, maybe doing your stretches, when you're in recovery time, your liver converts that lactic acid back to pyruvate and feeds it into the powerhouse. So 2 things are happening in this recovery time. Number 1, you're mopping up your lactic acid. Number 2, your pathway is running as fast when you're still as when you're running, because it's still being fed all that pyruvate from your lactic acid. Isn't that exciting? Wow. So it's not an excuse to stop and look at the view. Mm-hmm. It's actually important. Those little breaks are very important. You can get more out of 15 minutes than a 5K 1-hour jog. That's exciting. Because we're such a fast society today. Everyone's got 15 minutes, so sorry, there's no excuse now. All you've got to do now is what I had to do, is find a spot in your day where you can poke it. And the early morning is the best, because you will reap the benefits Not only physically, not only spiritually, but also mentally and emotionally, all through the day. Because you're getting powerful amounts of oxygen into those cells. Okay, we're up to our second set of high intensity. Glycogen stores are being quickly plucked. Love those glycogen stores, they're already in the muscle cell. Did you think of that? Those who climbed the mountain this morning, already in there, plucked and fed through the pathway, plucked and fed through the pathway. But by the, let's say, fourth set, our glycogen stores are all used up. That's like you've just exhausted the kitchen cupboards. Now we've got to go to the basement. Where's the basement, students? Yeah. So when these start getting used up, the brain's getting the message, we're running out of fuel. So what the brain does, from the pituitary gland, it releases the human growth hormone. And the human growth hormone is called the youth hormone. You'll see why as we go through this. So the human growth hormone is released and it activates hormone-sensitive lipase. Hormone-sensitive lipase is an enzyme that breaks down fat. Yesterday we looked at sublingual lipase that breaks down your short-chain fatty acids, saturated fats. We looked at pancreatic lipase that breaks down your long-chain fatty acids. So what fat does that lipase break down, students? Your fat stores. Your fat stores. Basically, when you're running out, your kitchen cupboards are running out, the human growth hormone gives you the key to the basement door. Can you see that? And the basement stores start to be released. The body now stops burning glucose as fuel and becomes a fat burner. Let me show you why. Glucose burns at 4 calories per gram. Whereas fat, it burns at 9 calories per gram. Every weight loss book will have this in psychedelic colours, is that right? And they will use that information as the reason why you've got to stop the fat if you want to lose weight. But they don't understand what a calorie is. A calorie is a unit of energy. So can you see why the body starts becoming a fat burner? Because fat is going to give more than twice the units of energies that glucose will give. Dr. Atkins, in the 1980s, he showed you can be on a 2,500 calorie a day diet that is all carbohydrates and you can put on weight. And you can be on a 2,500 calorie a day diet which is high fibre, generous proteins, healthy fats, and you can lose weight. That's the Atkins diet. There's the paleo, there's the ketogenic. And as I showed you yesterday, the brain loves fat as fuel because fat's going to give more than twice the units of energy. And your brain cell's consuming more fuel than any other cell. We're coming to the time in the week where you can see everything sort of fitting in. The pieces of the jigsaw are fitting in. The human growth hormone also increases the circulation of the blood to the skin. And what this does is this slows down aging and slows down the wrinkles. There's a book called The Gabriel Diet, or The Gabriel Protocol, by John Gabriel. Now, John Gabriel was 183 kilos, and he lost 103 kilos. So that would be 200 pounds, about that. And on the front of the book, there's a picture of him with his old pants, his old trousers. They're about this big. He was huge. So 183 kilo, that's probably nearly 400 pounds, something like that. He was huge. You know, you wouldn't have fitted on that chair. That's how he was grossly obese. And he lost 103 kilo, 200 pounds. Now, he doesn't explain this in his book in the detail I have, but he said that he would be walking along and he'd suddenly jump down and do 30 push-ups. His theory was he had to trick the body into getting ready in case a tiger was about to jump on him. That was his theory. But that's what he did. And if you look at him on the front page, he's got, I think inside the book, there's a picture of him with no shirt on. Wow. And his body looks like he's about 20. And he was in his 40s when he did this. You can count the abs on his... Oh. How did he do that? Where'd all that loose skin go? Because he was doing the high-intensity interval training, though it wasn't defined as such, that caused a release of the human growth hormone, which increases the circulation of the blood to the skin. The movie stars pay $1,000 a week for this human growth hormone. I'm giving it to you cut price today. And you can see why they pay $1,000 a week, because they need to look good. But let's say we've got identical twins. One lives in the mountain and runs up and down mountains every day and grows all her own veggies, and then the other one is a model. And then she becomes a movie star. She pays this so that she looks good. But she's 50 now and a few wrinkles are starting to come. So she doesn't want to pay that money anymore. And within 6 months, she ages about 10 years. Let's have a look at those identical twins when they're both 60. Who's going to look good? Yeah, they change roles then. When you keep putting the human growth hormone in, of course the body says, I don't have to make this anymore. The human growth hormone is very active when we're growing. When we finish growing, you're probably not surprised to know that I haven't grown since I was 16. Our body stops growing. My son William, he grew 2 inches from 20 to 22. Boys are often still growing. The human growth hormone goes into retirement when we stop growing, unless it's called on. And when you do the high intensity interval training, you're calling on it. The human growth hormone also increases the body's ability to utilize protein. This week we've looked at the importance of eating sufficient protein. We've looked at the importance of not drinking large amounts with your meals, so you're not watering down your hydrochloric acid so you can break down your protein. Well, this is another aspect, and that is when you do this high intensity interval training causing a release of the human growth hormone, it increases your body's ability to utilize the protein. My son James, who works out for a hobby, he explains it like this. He says, when you do that high intensity interval training, it's like you're laying a bed of hot coals at the cellular level. And when you lay a bed of hot coals at the cellular level, you can put the fuel in. It's like when you have a fire, you've got a bed of hot coals, you can put huge logs in and it'll just burn the brighter. It's as very as simple as this. If you want to eat, you got to work for it. How many people do this? They wake up in the morning, few steps to the bathroom, few steps to the kitchen table, and they put the logs in. And if you put logs in a fire that's just started, you put the fire out. And they basically are putting the fire out. They've got no energy. And yet they're living in the land of plenty. You compare this to someone wakes up in the morning early because they went to bed early. They have their water, their salt. Visit the bathroom, another bit of water and salt, then run up and down the hills, laying a bed of hot coals at the cellular level, come back, have more water, have their hot and cold shower, sit down and they can put the logs in, the waffles and the fruit salad and the pear cream and the lentils, and they'll just burn the brighter. Doug McGuff, he found that some of his very obese patients were always tired. They're living in the land of plenty and they're dying of starvation. There's one way to access this. Wake up, wake up. Well, you wake up when you're running for your life. And you can actually change your metabolic rate by doing that. This is the only thing that will increase your metabolic rate. We had a young man named Dan do our program. He's a type 1 diabetic. He was on 90 units of insulin a day and he's 19. He got diabetes at the age of 15 after a very strong course of antibiotics that had damaged his pancreas. He was a little overweight. He didn't tell me this because he was with us for 4 weeks. He had 2 weeks at the program and 2 weeks in the garden. First week, if he had a blood sugar level low in the middle of the night, he'd get up and take a candy, you call it. Would that get the blood sugar level up? Oh, yes. But he always gave him a headache because it just, boom, too high, too fast. Second week, he was starting to feel a bit guilty, so he decided to eat an apple if he got a blood sugar level low in the middle of the night. By the way, why is he having lows? He's still taking too much insulin. That's what insulin does, gets it down. If you're on too much insulin, it'll just go too low. Second week, he ate an apple in the middle of the night. Bit hard to eat an apple in the middle of the night, you know, it takes a while. That would get his blood sugar level up, but it wouldn't give him a headache. Third week, after hearing these lectures twice and realising what he could do, he would get up in the middle of the night if he had a blood sugar level low, and he'd do 30 push-ups. That would get his blood sugar level up. How come? What was he accessing? Glycogen stores. Already sitting in the muscle cell. In fact, he told me he got up one morning. Now, forgive me because our scales are different in Australia. So I'll just tell you our normal blood sugar level would be about 6.5. So you see our scales are a little different. It's like cholesterol. You know, a normal cholesterol for us would be 5.5, 6.5. So the scales are a little different. So he got up one morning and his blood glucose levels were 3. Now that's nearly passing out. You know, that's very, very low, especially if you consider it should be about 6.5. Someone who's, you know, who they put on insulin immediately might have a blood sugar level of 20. Can you see that, those scales? So he got up, had a blood sugar level of 3, took his salt, glass of water, bathroom, more salt, more water, got dressed, more salt, more water, went running up and down the hills, came back, 20 minutes later, took his blood glucose levels, 9. And he'd had nothing to eat. And you know what he said to me after a few weeks? Why hadn't anyone told me about glycogen? Isn't it the diabetic's best kept secret? They don't need to have a candy, they just need to get on the exercise bike. They just need to jump on that rebounder, do some push-ups. Can't do push-ups, do it on the wall. Fascinating. We had a diabetic nurse doing the program when he said this. She said, that's very dangerous. He said, well, if you think it's too dangerous to go out on a run, put an apple in your pocket. When he went home after 4 weeks, he was on 10 units of insulin a day, type 1 diabetic. He was excited. So you can see that it's not just food, it's not just sleep, and that's very important. They're actually saying now sleep is more important than exercise or diet. Now that's quite a statement, isn't it? But it is also exercise. You know, it's very hard to put one above another. They're all so very important, the balance of these laws. So no wonder it is such a powerful form of exercise. And it also explains why a common phone call or email we get 6 weeks after this health program is 10 kilos or say 20 pound lost. And the people say it's like we're not even on a diet. We're eating so well, but they're eating most of their food, breakfast and lunch. They're doing this high intensity interval training. They're drinking their water between meals, so it all comes together to have an incredible effect. I find that on this program, the underweight put it on. What I'd like to do, I've referred to a couple of times, and that is your lymphatic system. Your lymphatic system is an important system. Most people know what their blood system is. They know their arteries and their capillaries and their veins and the heart that pumps it. But if someone were to ask you, what's your lymphatic system, most people don't know. But I think you do know because we have mentioned it. It's your vacuum cleaner. And what does a vacuum cleaner do? It sweeps away waste. This sweeps away waste from the tissues. And it has a capillary system too. Lots of little networks. And they're like little canals and they have gates all the way along them. The blood doesn't have gates like that. And your lymphatic system doesn't have a pump either. Around your blood capillary system, there's a muscular system, so when that heart pumps, there's a pumping all through the body. That's where you can feel your pulse. You can feel your pulse at different places. But the lymphatic system, it does not have a muscular network around it. So what moves the lymphatic system is movement. But the movement that is the most powerful to stimulate your lymphatic system is rebounding, or the trampoline. Now, we have a book in our library. It's by Albert Carter. Albert Carter's probably in his 70s now, and I think his son has taken up the cause. And Albert Carter, he wrote his book in about the 80s. I have an update of his book, which was written in 2014. And instead of pictures of Albert Carter, who looked like this, there are pictures of his son, who looks like this. Albert Carter was a trampolinist. He was an Olympian trampolinist. He married, had children, and they did a trampoline show. So he would, travel with his kids and his wife and him all doing these tricks on the trampoline. He was incredibly fit, and he didn't do any weight bearing. He didn't do anything other than trampolining. And he noticed that his little 4-year-old girl, he could hold her ankles and she would do one-arm push-ups. That's strong. And his little boy was only a little fella, and at school, when anyone bullied him, he'd challenge them to push-ups, and his little boy could do 1,000 push-ups. No one could meet him with push-ups. And Albert Carter scratched his head. He thought, why are my kids so strong? They're incredibly strong. They're stronger than the average kid. Now, I don't know whether he ever looked in the mirror, but he was pretty big himself. So he wanted to investigate. Don't you love it when someone puts their detective hat on and does all the investigation for us? He couldn't find anywhere, this is in the 80s, that talked much about the effect of trampolining until he came to NASA. What NASA found is when their astronauts came back from outer space, sometimes they'd lost 25% bone and muscle strength. And NASA discovered that there was only one form of exercise that got them strong enough to prevent so much loss and also regained that strength quicker when they came back, and that was the trampolining. So he was so excited in about the 90s when he discovered the little mini trampolines, which is what we call the rebounders today. So as he investigated, he found that there are 3 forces that come together to explain why rebounding is so powerful. One is defying gravity, and when you think about it, that is the only way to gain strength, is to defy gravity. It is the defying of gravity that causes the cells to be strong. You look at a little baby. My daughter's just had a little tiny baby. Within days, what's that baby trying to do? Put the head up. This is against gravity. And you put the baby on the floor. It's not long before what that baby's trying to do, push up. And then eventually they push up to the point where they're crawling up on things. And then you put them in their cot and they start jumping. Constantly defying gravity. Isn't it interesting? Watch the way a child breathes. They breathe with their abdominal muscles. Watch the way they sit. I used to notice my babies would sit so tall. They run with their toes. They breathe with their abdominal muscles. And they jump. I've come to the conclusion that people get old because they stop jumping. It's time to jump. But the beauty of the rebounder is there's no jarring. Albert Carter talks about runners with lower back, hamstring. He gets them on the rebounder, and within about 6 months, they've resolved their problems because they're not jarring anymore. So one of them's defying gravity. There's your push-ups. There's your constantly pushing away from gravity strengthens the body. Also, acceleration. When you are on, I don't know if there's 1 L or 2 L's. When you are bouncing on that rebounder, when you get to the tip of your bounce, from the mat to the tip, you're accelerating. And when you reach the tip of your bounce, then you experience another force, and that's deceleration. And as you start to fall down from the tip of your bounce, you experience acceleration again. And when you hit the mat, you experience deceleration. And then you bounce back off the mat. These three forces are constantly, split second, your body's experiencing them. And every single cell in the body, there is no other exercise that affects every single cell in the body. Your hearing increases, your balance. Do you know your balance is set by the bottom of your feet and the mechanisms inside your ear? A lot of people don't want to get on the rebounder because their balance isn't good. That's how you balance it. A lot of ladies don't want to get on the rebounder. They've just had a baby or their bladder's weak and they'll feel a little urine come so they don't get on. Well, that's the very muscle that's strengthened by rebounding. Just empty the bladder first before you go on the rebounder. Every single, can you see this is happening constantly, but there's no jarring because there's the cushioning of the bounce. So everyone can do it. That's why you just start with this. If you're not sure, just start with this. You're a little unsteady, just hold on. And you can increase your eyesight too. That's always interesting, isn't it? Or attractive. How do you increase your eyesight? Try this next time you're bouncing. This is what I do, and I usually change my focus every 10 jumps. So if I had a rebounder here and I'm looking out that window there, I would target the branch of the tree. And as I'm focused on that and I'm jumping, the car, the chapel, the background starts bouncing all around, but I'm focusing on the branch of the tree. And then after 10 jumps, I'll focus on the distant hill. And then the branch I just kept still starts bouncing in my peripheral vision. Can you see what you're doing? You're strengthening your long and your short range. So at my house, I've got some hanging pots outside, and then in the distance there's the cows in the paddock. You don't call it a paddock. Field? Pasture, across the road. So I'm constantly changing my focus. And the good news is the glasses that I read now, just for magnifying on the light is not good, they have not ever changed. Isn't that good news? I only really wear glasses. In fact, if there's small writing, I'd prefer to go to the sun and let the sun look at it, but sometimes it's incredibly small. Then I have glasses just for the fine print. You probably know that glasses weaken the eye. You've got to challenge those eyes. And our short and long range muscles are set by the age of 11. And they're finding now that so many children are wearing glasses like we never ever saw children wearing glasses, because their short range vision is getting overworked and their long range vision is getting neglected. As one old doctor said, eye doctor, he said, we need to spend more time gazing at the mountains. It's not hard to do here, is it? It's very nice. So your children, your grandchildren, your nieces and your nephews, you've got to put rules on that technology. And I tell you what, using that technology, it's great. Have you done your homework? Is your room cleaned? Is the dishwasher empty? Have the clothes been taken off the line? Yeah, okay. 15 minutes. In the kitchen, where the mother or the adult can have their eye on exactly what's happening on there. Oh, I tell you, what a clean house you can have. And I was just at my daughter's house, and I tell you what is the best tool she's got. Best tool she's got. If this isn't ready, you've lost your phone for 3 days. Whoa, I tell you what, that hurts more than a beating. So use it. Use it. And you'll find it'll greatly reduce the child's exposure, and all the jobs are done. It's real easy. One mother who didn't have much control over a child, who just wouldn't give it up, when he fell asleep at night, she went in and took it. Hid it then. But far better if you have a relationship with the child. And I was at my daughter's place, and her son didn't get everything done, and he's 18, he was crying. He was sitting in the lounge room with a towel over his head. She said, look at him. Because he'd just lost his phone for 3 days. Whoa, did that hurt. Oh, that hurt. But you've got to have those guidelines, because when they leave home, guess what? There's rules. But far better to lay down the rules in a home. That's why you have to be very consistent. And if you don't take the phone off them when you say you're going to, you've just lost everything. You've got to do it. If you're not going to do it, don't say it. So back to the power of the rebounding. The most powerful exercise there is. But the effect that it has on the lymphatic system is more powerful than any other form of exercise. When you hit the mat and you're bouncing off, and then you hit your peak of your bounce, every single gate opens. It's the only exercise that does that. Every single gate through your whole lymphatic system opens. And when you hit the mat, it closes. And when you're up to the peak, it opens again. And when you hit the mat, it closes again. So this pumping system happens. That's why the most important time to do it is early in the morning. You start up your lymphatic system early in the morning, 2 minutes, that's all you need. 2 minutes. 2 minutes on that rebounder will open up your lymphatic system. And then every time you walk, every time you scratch your head, move around, all those little movements that we automatically do through the day, it maintains the running of your lymphatic system. Albert Carter, his suggestion is 3 minutes, 3 times a day. Whew, there's not much, is it? You've got to really have an appointment. If you don't make an appointment, you just don't do it. You don't say, I'll do it later, because we all know it doesn't happen, does it? So the best time to exercise is before breakfast. You can implement the high-intensity interval training on the rebounder, because as you can see, you've still got those times. If your calves are really getting challenged because they're not used to the amount on the rebounder, for your recovery time, you might get off your rebounder and do some stretches, your upper body. But a great way to strengthen your biceps is to rebound with your thumbs down. That strengthens biceps. For triceps, your palm up. So I always do 10 down, 10 up. So you can do your weight bearing, and you can see what you're using for weight bearing is your own weight against gravity. It's one of the best bone strengthening exercises there is. It is the best muscle strengthening exercise there is. Albert Carter quotes a study that was done in a gym. It had 20, because it was 2 lots of 10, very fit young men. And they had the Tabata protocol. You know, they're so much on the rowing machine, so much on push-ups, so much on, you know, all of this. One lot, they got them to do 30 seconds rebounding, that's it, between in every one of the cycles. So I think there were 10 different activities. 3 months later, they tested the strength, and there was something like 30% greater strength in the ones that had rebounded between every set. That's very impressive. And again, NASA found this was the only type of exercise that not only strengthened their body to the point where they didn't have as much loss, because you know in outer space there is no gravity, but it also increased their G-force. Increased their ability to withstand the forces going outside the planet. And when they came back, they replaced that strength faster doing rebounder than any other type of exercise. A lady rang me, she said, Barbara, I've got an ulcer on my leg. So I was telling her what she could do, and I said, wow, you know, this lady was in her 70s. I said, exercise is so important, but, you know, the leg. I said, do you know anyone with a rebounder? Oh, she said, I've got one in my garage. Do you call it a garage? Shed? Garage. She said, I'll just get the neighbour boy to come and blow the dust of it. Whoa, and how many people have this rebounder out in their back shed, not realising they got gold out there. Like there's a gold mine in your backyard and you don't even know it. Just imagine if every office had a rebounder in the corner and every single person in the office did 1 minute every hour. Do you remember the story I told you of the guy that came with the swollen legs, and I got him to do 1 minute every hour because it was because any swelling you see in the body is your lymphatic fluid. And what the rebounder does is it stimulates the flow of that lymphatic system or that lymphatic fluid through the body. I had a man do our program and he said, a year ago, we call it busted his leg, broke his leg. He was in hospital for 3 months. The operation didn't work, they had to redo it, he was on traction. He said, I left that hospital bed fitter than I've ever been. I said, fitter? How so? He said, my mates came in and they built a gym around the bed. And every hour, and the leg that did work, up and down. So sorry, there's no excuse. No matter where you are, no matter what, no matter your age, and remember, muscle knows no age. Did I get an amen from our exercise coordinator in the background there? Is that true? Muscle knows no age. Whether you're 9 or 90, you can be fit. Our exercise coordinator is 55 and the guests think he's 35. They can't believe that this guy... You know what Howard does? He rides his bicycle to work up hills like this. And the guests up in the top rooms, they can hear him coming. And he wakes them up at 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. Yeah, we're very kind. We wake you up at 6. So he wakes up at 5 every single morning. He's worked for us for 17 years. Waking up every morning. And wakes the guests, then goes on the exercise program with them, and then he goes back home and exercises with his wife, and then he massages all morning, and then he does the core strengthening Pilates type exercises with them at 1 o'clock. And then in our steam bath down by the creek, he's chopping wood all afternoon because our steam sauna is a wood-fired one. And for fun, 3 days a week, he gets his bike, puts it in the back of his car, goes to the end of where the tar starts, or the end of the gravel where the tar starts, and does a 40k ride for fun. Now, Howard's worked with us for 17 years, and he's just this bundle of energy that laughs half the day. He gets even the crankiest person coming off cigarettes and caffeine laughing. If you go to our website, you probably see a picture of Howard. I say to people, you want to be as happy as Howard, you want to look like Howard, you've got to do what Howard does. You've got to be that active. And I also the other day talked about the tragedy of the amount of ladies who are experiencing prolapse. And so they go and the doctor has to sew meshing. Why? Because those cells have no tone. He has to use mesh because he can't sew the cells together. They're falling apart. Why are they falling apart? Because of lack of nutrition. And remember, those caffeines, they're just leaching those minerals out because of lack of hydration, because of lack of exercise. You know what? The doctors would love it if they didn't have to use the mesh. And by the way, if the ladies' muscles and core strength were so strong, they wouldn't even have the prolapse. Not many prolapses happen in those countries where the ladies do this all day. Okay, we've got every day we should be squatting. How come I can squat so easily? Well, I read a book when I was pregnant with my 6th called Active Birth by Janet Velasquez. And she advocated squatting. Well, I could not squat. I could not squat. And she said, put your back against the wall and squat for 10 minutes a day. So that's what I did. And then by the time I went into labour, I squatted every contraction. And when the baby came out of me, the whole baby flew out with one push, bag intact. In fact, my friend, she's a doctor, she was with me. She was, whoa, and they caught the baby. Whoa, get some scissors, we're going to pull this baby out. Wow. So that squatting opens that whole area. I showed you how it opens and allows you to do your daily evacuation, but it also opens that whole pelvis area. It's actually an incredibly natural way to sit, to squat. So when I garden today, I basically garden like this. I just garden like this. I can even have a skirt on because I'm squatting. And when I used to squat in the garden, my little toddler, he'd run along and he'd lie in my skirt while I'm gardening. And that squatting also strengthens your core muscles. So it's the whole picture. My husband squats every day. Oh, he was not happy at first. He just could not squat. Oh, he's very happy. If he was here right now, he'd say, yep, yep, and he'd go up and down a few times. So if you can't do it now, you will be able to do it. Some people can't because knees aren't working well. So if you can't, you can at least do this. And one of the best ways to get used to squatting is just doing this, because it's your thigh muscles that basically get you back up again. And notice that the biggest muscle mass in the whole body is your quads, your thighs. And the biggest bone in the whole body is your femur. Do you ever wonder why? God gave us that because when we bend or lift, it should be with our thighs. So when we bend, that back should be straight. And when that back's straight and the knees bent, then when you lift, all your weight is taken on your thighs. How many people have lower back problems because they sit and bend like that? There should never be a bend there. You ever watched a 2-year-old pick up a ball? This is how they do it. They pick it up like that. How do we do it? And that weakens the back. So please be mindful of your lower back. Be mindful if you don't have strength in your quads. This is one of the easiest ways to get strength. Not quite down and not quite up. And your thighs will start screaming at you. Give them a break. You can do it while you're doing the dishes. You can do it at simple things. Just build up those quads, because those quads will help to protect your lower back. How many people have lower back problems? One reason is they're dehydrated. Another reason is that their cells don't lack, or they don't have nutrition to be able to build strong muscles, but also they don't bend right. And one of the reasons they don't bend right is they haven't got strength in their core, and they're used to sitting like this. Is that right? We should be sitting like the little babies do, with the back straight. I'm going to give everyone a break now. When we come back, we're going to look at water and salt. So we're going to come back at 1:45. My feet swell. Don't drink water or I'm running to the bathroom all day. Those last two answers tell me that the water is not getting into the CBD. The water is not getting inside the cell, because if the water is not getting inside the cell, the tissues swell. And the other day we did talk about a dry plant. You put water in, what happens? It all runs out the bottom. So how can we get the water inside the cell? To understand how to get the water inside the cell, we need to have a look at the 4 most vital elements needed for life. So here are the 4 vitals. Number 1 is oxygen, and that's not a surprise, is it? Number 2 is water, and I don't think that's a surprise either. Number 3 is usually a surprise though, and that is sodium. Number 4 is potassium, and our breakfast this morning, our meals every day are very high in potassium. All your fresh fruits and vegetables, especially your dark green leafies, very high in potassium. But what I want to do is target number 3. Now, whether you look at a biology book, an anatomy and physiology book, a chemistry book, this is what you will find. These are the 4 most vital elements needed for life. Let's have a look at sodium. The highest concentration of sodium is found in seawater. And seawater contains 92 minerals. Of those 92 minerals, 30% is made of sodium. Now, this one piece of information alone tells us how we should be having sodium, with all the rest. And 50% is made up of chloride. And because sodium chloride make up the most amount, the first crystals formed when the water is evaporated is sodium chloride. So they haven't got time to wait for the rest. They just scoop that up, bleach it white, put aluminium with it. There's your table salt. And sometimes they have the hide to call it sea salt. So if the sea salt is white and runs freely, I'd be very concerned. So table salt as the doctor suggests, is a dangerous salt because it only has 2 minerals. And it will get the blood pressure up because those 2 minerals cause an imbalance of the mineral amount in and out of the cell. There's the pressure. So, because of thyroid problems, they've made another salt, iodized salt. Is that right? Is that any better? Well, now it has 3 minerals. And within 1 hour of opening the iodized salt, all the iodine evaporates. The salt that I prefer is Celtic salt. And Celtic salt is a grey, moist salt. And it contains 82 minerals. Himalayan salt is similar. Himalayan salt contains 75 minerals. But the reason why I prefer the Celtic, and if you can't get the Celtic, the Himalayan is certainly far superior than the table salt. The Celtic salt contains 3 magnesiums. It contains magnesium sulfate, it contains magnesium bromide, and magnesium chloride. Magnesium is a water-hungry molecule, and that's why the Celtic salt is such a moist salt. In fact, if we have a lot of rain, you'll find it'll get even moister. And that's why if you put it into a little grinder, the grinders that we sell are glass and ceramic, because if you put it in where it's metal, the metal will rust. And you just get a little bit of the salt, put it in the oven, dry it out, then put it in your grinder and then it will grind. One lady said she got to the bottom of her bottle of Celtic salt and it was all liquid in the bottom, so she threw it out. I said, no. Instead, just do a spoonful of liquid in your cooking. Or mix it with water and spray your plants. Oh, how they love the minerals. Because magnesium is a water-hungry molecule, when you put a crystal of Celtic salt in your mouth, the mucous membranes immediately take up the minerals, and those minerals are picked up by the blood. The magnesium is taken to the cell, then you drink your water, the magnesium pulls the water inside the cell. It's the quickest way to hydrate a body. And I find when people tell me that they don't drink water because they're running to the bathroom all the time, if they start drinking the water little by little instead of all at once, and before every glass of water they take that little bit of salt, they find that their visits aren't as frequent. So I think your bottles there are 1 litre or 1 quart, yeah? Mm-hmm. So when you start, you'll have a little salt. When you're a quarter of the way through it, you'll have another little bit of salt. When you're halfway through it, you have another little bit of salt. When you're 3/4 through, you'll have another little bit of salt. Can you see that? So 8 glasses of water a day, you're having 8 crystals of Celtic salt. Dr. Robert Thompson, in his book, The Calcium Lie, he said, when you do that, all you're doing is replacing the minerals you lost yesterday. Dr. Lelangri, a French doctor who wrote a whole book on salt, he said, if I have someone come to me with high blood pressure, I immediately put them on the Celtic salt because it brings back a balance. We have sodium-potassium pumps in the membrane around the cell. I've drawn this bilayered membrane. And these sodium-potassium pumps are constantly going like this, balancing the sodium and the potassium inside and outside the cell. The largest concentration of mineral inside the cell is sodium, outside it's potassium. Sorry, sodium outside, potassium inside. There is a little bit of sodium inside the cell, but it's predominantly potassium. And these pumps, they balance the sodium and potassium levels. But if someone's not having any potassium, they're living on fast food, not having any fresh fruit and vegetables, potassium levels are dropping. And have you noticed when someone is only having table salt, they put it on everything, they don't even taste the food. That's because these minerals are so harsh they kill the taste buds. No wonder they've got to put salt on everything. Their taste buds are dying. But you will notice that this Celtic salt, it awakens the taste buds. The lentils this morning would not have tasted very nice if they didn't have some salt in them. So what's happening here in the person that's having table salt on everything and not having any potassium levels are dropping, sodium levels are rising, and sodium starts leaching more and more into the cell because osmosis and diffusion happen when the highest concentration merges into the lower, so you get this rising. The cell swells, there's your high blood pressure. So the doctor says, stop the salt. And the person stops the salt. What happens now is sodium levels go too low inside the cell. And when that goes too low, the cell swells. And if there's no sodium inside that cell, it will explode. The Bible talks about salt, and one of the places it talks about it is Matthew 13 verse 5, where the Bible says, "Ye are the salt of the earth. If the salt has lost its savour, wherewith shall it be salted? It is henceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under foot of men." How does salt lose its savour? I'd like to suggest that this salt has lost its savour. It's lost all the minerals. What does the Bible say? It's now good for nothing to be cast out. So I agree. Table salt is good for nothing. If I'm in a restaurant and I need a bit of salt and that's all there is, I'll use it. But remember, it's not the odd day you do it and the odd day you don't. It's what you do every day that has an effect. But most of the time I have my little trusty bag with my tiny little salt in it, and I certainly do use that. Something else happens when the magnesium pulls the water inside the cell. In the membrane around the cell there's a little motor, and when the water rushes through under the action of magnesium, the little motor starts spinning. And that gives us a unit of energy. So if you're feeling tired mid-morning, mid-afternoon, have a crystal of Celtic salt and your water, and watch your energy get a little. And then after you've done that, get on your rebounder and have a minute on the rebounder. Still a little bit tired, go outside and breathe very gently under the tree. Remember Peter and Sophia. 1, 2. Especially if the people in the office are getting irritating. We can do some questions at the end. So if a doctor says to you, salt is dangerous, you can say, well, I certainly acknowledge that table salt is dangerous because it only has 2 minerals and seawater has 92 minerals, and we need the balance. Did you get that?
That's a mouthful.
And sodium, but doctor, isn't sodium the third most vital element needed for life? Because he does study it. Dr. Robert Thompson, fascinating book, he says, we learn all this in med school. But it's a type of learning that I'm totally against. Cramming! Oh, no. Give them the test 6 months later, would they pass? And he says, and we go into private practice, and he said, it's like the blinkers come up. He was about to get out of medicine. He didn't see people getting better. And he did a nutrition course, and his eyes were open. And so he wrote the book, The Calcium Lie. There's one chapter, and in this chapter he talks about the calcium lie, the cholesterol lie, the salt lie, the fat lie. Oh, there's a whole lot. And you probably come to that conclusion through this work. Lining your gastrointestinal tract are villi. And on that villi are receptor sites. And there's a carrier in there designed to take the glucose through and into the blood. The carrier says, I will not accept you, glucose, unless you come with a molecule of sodium. So if a person's on a salt-free diet, can you see that maybe half their glucose can't get into the blood? It's going to all end up in the toilet. It's the third most vital element needed for life. So I've memorised what I read in the anatomy and physiology book so I could give it to you from the horse's mouth. Sodium is the main transport system of glucose across the brush border wall and into the blood. So a salt-free diet is actually dangerous. And yes, a high table salt diet is dangerous. How often does humanity use that extreme to run to that extreme? Salt is important. It's the third most vital element needed for life. But we need to take it the way it is found in nature with all the other minerals. And what's a baked potato without salt?
No.
What's tomato and avocado on your spelt sourdough toast without salt? Our palate tells us that we need a little bit of salt. Calcium cannot get into the cell by itself. It needs vitamin D. Have you been getting your vitamin D? I noticed when I was driving home yesterday afternoon, there were about 6 or 7 ladies up on that veranda in the sun. Very nice. So when I went home, I got a chair and I pulled it straight out and put it in the sun and just sat there for 10 minutes after a very busy day and just let that sun go straight on my face. It's not the enemy in the sky. When vitamin D is present, calcium gets pulled into the cell. And when calcium comes into the cell, all the other minerals piggyback on the back of it. Glucose. It cannot get into the cell by itself. It needs insulin. When insulin is present, then the glucose can be pulled inside the cell. But let me show you what's happening with many Americans today. They're not drinking enough water. They're not having minerals. The salt that they're having does not have the minerals in it, does not have the magnesium, and the little bit of water they're having isn't getting into the cell, so they basically almost stop drinking water because they're feeling swell. And they don't go out into the sun because they've believed the media hype that it's the enemy in the sky. So they're not getting their calcium, they're not getting their minerals in, and they're trying to lose weight, so they've gone on a fat-free diet. And all day long, they're nibbling on carbs, and they think it's safe because the bread says fat-free and the cookie says fat-free. And so what happens is their pancreas gets overworked and it stops producing insulin, but something else happens before that. It's called insulin resistance. On the high carbohydrate, high sugar diet, huge amounts of glucose being released, and so the brain says to the pancreas, quick, huge amounts of insulin. And this cell, it says, I'm sick of the sight of you. And it develops insulin resistance. You've heard of insulin resistance? And so the glucose is still in the blood. And so the brain says, oh no, more insulin, more insulin. And the pancreas just gets totally worn out and says, that's it, I'm done. No more. There's your diabetes. You can turn insulin resistance around. In fact, if you had it when you came here, you're going to go home without it. How do you turn it around? Get the carbs right down. Do the high-intensity interval training, and you can flip that straight around. You can see by what you're seeing, especially in this lecture, you can actually change your metabolic rate. You can change the way your body runs. If Gladys could talk right now, she could cheer. Is that right? Yeah, her body language was telling you. There it is. And if you came here with a fatty liver, it's probably half gone by now. That's the good news. One lady said, 3 years ago, I was diagnosed, different D, with a fatty liver. I said, it's probably gone now. If you give the body right conditions, it wants to heal you. It wants to balance you. It's just waiting for you to do the right thing. And unfortunately, most people are sick through ignorance. Most people don't realize. And so you can conquer high blood pressure by drinking more water, but not all at once. By sipping it over the day, by having that little bit of magnesium in the salt before every glass. By having a bit of sun every single day. The darker your skin, the more sun you need. By getting the carbohydrates right down. By exercising every day. by drinking adequate water. You can turn it around by doing that. We have a book at our health retreat. It's called One of the Body's Many Cries for Water, and it's by Dr. Batman Geheldij. I call him Dr. B. He's an Iranian doctor. And he was a political prisoner in Iran. And because he was the doctor, everyone came to him when they got sick. And all he had was water. So no matter what their problem was, he'd give them a glass of water. 15 minutes later, he'd give them another glass of water. Go on his rounds, give them more glasses of water, come back on the next rounds, the migraines eased, the headaches eased, the asthma attack has eased, the pain from the stomach ulcer has eased. He's scratching his head. What's going on here? He thought, all I've done is given them water. So he began to investigate and he began to write down his findings. He was freed because the politics changed, and he said, look, do you mind if I stay a bit longer? Never had anyone say that before. I'm right in the middle of this fascinating research. And so he wrote the book, One of the Body's Many Cries for Water. And the second title is He's Not Sick, He's Thirsty. The other title is Don't Treat Thirst with Medications. Wow. He maintains 80% of mankind's ills are due to dehydration. Fascinating what he found. He found one of the first places that dehydration is felt, and by the way, in a state of chronic dehydration, that person loses the thirst signal. So thirst is only a guide in a well-hydrated person who hasn't drunk water for a couple of hours. But in a chronically dehydrated person, they lose the thirst signal. When I worked as a nurse in post-op, we had fluid balance charts. And this was the fluid we'd write down. Tea, coffee, juice, Coke, jelly, custard. There's no fluid at all. In fact, every single one of those fluids contains dehydrating agents. In fact, it's a miracle people survive and go home when you consider what happens. What Dr. B showed is that the stomach has a thick mucosa lining, and we looked at that when we looked at the gut on Monday night. In dehydration, the body takes water from different areas to keep up full blood volume in the major blood systems, and so it takes water. Now we've only got a thin mucosa lining. And I don't know if you remember, but in that thick mucosa lining is sodium bicarbonate, so that if any acid comes through, it's immediately neutralised to protect the stomach lining. But there's no sodium bicarbonate in there, so it's very easy for the acid in the stomach to burn holes in the lining. Dr. B, he maintained that by the time he wrote his book, he cured 6,000 cases of stomach ulcer with water alone. Half an hour before a meal, a glass of water will thicken that mucosa wall. I had a man come from South Africa with his wife. He did not want to be at our health retreat, but his wife had paid the full amount before they came, so he had to come. And every question I asked him was, yes, no, no. Are you on medication? I am. What for? Stomach pain. I said, oh. I said, are you interested in coming off the medication? No. I always respect everyone's choice. He said, I've had stomach pain for 25 years. He said, I've got Helicobacter pylori in my gut. You've heard of Helicobacter pylori? He said, I'm on a different antibiotic every month. Oh, how long have you been doing this? 4 months now. Last breath test, it was still there. What's the definition of insanity? You do what you've always done. I'm not criticising him. He's gone to the experts hoping that they can help. And I think they're hoping that the next antibiotic will do it. I said, how much water do you drink? He said, 2 litres a day. And because he was so resistive, I didn't explore much. In fact, I was eager to get the consultation over as quick as him. After hearing the first lecture, where I talk about the body's ability to heal itself, he and his wife came running up and said, that makes so much sense. We're interested in stopping our Helicobacter meds. I said, fine. I gave them slippery elm every morning and every evening to coat and soothe the lining. At the end of the week, I had a very happy man in front of me. He said, I've had no stomach pain for 2 years. He said, first time in 25 years. I said, wow, that's good news. But what he said to me next was even more exciting to me. He said, I've worked out the problem. See, you're the doctor. This is just the mirror. He said, I was drinking 1 litre of water with every meal. So when he said 2 litres of water, I thought, all right, he's drinking this water, we'll move on to the next question. So I want to show you what was happening in his stomach. So when he eats food, what happens is hydrochloric acid's released. See, as soon as you smell food, as soon as you see food, your digestive juices were already acting before we even began to eat. Because your brain said, this is coming, okay guys, get ready. So the hydrochloric acid's released, and one of hydrochloric acid's roles is to kill bacteria. Now, because of his dehydration, you see, he sits to it with total dehydration. Helicobacter pylori, our own bacteria, our own microorganisms evolve into a bacterial form to clean up the mess. So when he starts to eat, hydrochloric acid, it's just about to go down and wipe them out. And what does he do? There's a great big drink of water. And what does that do to hydrochloric acid? In fact, you can do an experiment. You can buy hydrochloric acid and pour a cup of water into it and you can see for yourself. Helicobacter pylori goes, that was close. Chomp, chomp, chomp. Every day when his antibiotic comes in, it wipes out Helicobacter pylori. But because the waste is there, more microorganisms evolve into Helicobacter pylori. It's like you've probably heard what happened in Gallipoli. Tragic story. The young men would go up to fight them and they'd just be wiped out. Then the next crop went out. Right? And there was a miscommunication between the sergeant and the guys in top. Because I know it well because it was the Aussies that were totally wiped out in Gallipoli. You know, they're just continually going up and wiped out. That's what's happening here. They keep coming up, wipe them out, then we've got the next crop ready to come along. Doesn't make much sense, does it? And here we are 4 months later and you've still got Helicobacter pylori. And the doctor's about to put him on. The doctor's actually got the antibiotics planned for the next few months. So what he discovered at Misty Mountain, that he had to stop drinking water with the meals. He had to start drinking between meals. And you've probably noticed, if you're well hydrated when you sit to eat, you don't feel the drink. And that glass of water half an hour before the meal thickened the mucosa wall. And then when he smelt food and started to eat, hydrochloric acid's released, wipe out, wipe out. His body healed itself. Didn't a group of doctors in Perth in Australia get a Nobel Prize for discovering that Helicobacter pylori causes stomach ulcers? They were putting Helicobacter pylori into people and creating the stomach ulcer. But was that person dehydrated? Was that person drinking with their meals? Can you see all the other things that have to come into the equation? 25 years he's had stomach pain. 4 days it took, 4 days, and he had no stomach pain. His body healed itself. Just incredible. If someone says, I've got Helicobacter pylori, I said, congratulations, we all have. It's only when it's out of control, but then the question has to be asked, why is it out of control? Is it because of low hydrochloric acid? Is it because of drinking with the meals, etc., etc.? If you come down the gastrointestinal tract, we come to the pancreas. And into the blood from the pancreas is released insulin and glucagon, and they're the two that control blood glucose levels. And they're made out of water. So if a person's dehydrated, it can be contributing to diabetes. And into the gut, the pancreas releases, we looked at them the other day, enzymes that break down the starch, enzymes that break down the fats, enzymes that break down the protein. But they are all made out of water. But something else is released, and that's sodium bicarbonate. Sodium bicarbonate is released from the pancreas so that what's coming out of the stomach, which is acid, can be neutralized. Let's come down to the large intestine. One of the main functions of the large intestine is to take water out so stools are formed. So if the person's dehydrated, more water gets taken out than should be taken out. In his book, One of the Body's Many Cries for Water, Dr. B, he goes into every body system, goes to the brain, goes to the lungs, and shows that many of the complaints happening in these parts of the body are due to dehydration. Well, that one's easy fix, isn't it? We had a man do our program. He was 44, he was a builder, big guy. He had 3 main problems. Number 1, chronic headaches. He was on headache medication all day long. Lower back pain, he was on the medication for that as well, the painkillers, and a very congested chest. I said, how much water do you drink a day? Now, he's a builder. Where are builders? They're outside. We see some out there. They're on the roof, so they're perspiring. They need more. He said, I don't drink water. It's not many times I meet someone who drinks no water. Oh, what do you drink? Oh, tea, coffee, Coke. Now, I never comment because I'm not the person to comment. I'm just the scribe. I just write it all down. And I know as he hears the lectures, the light bulbs go off. Did you know that inside every little alveoli at the end of your bronchioles, there's a little droplet of water? And because of the surface tension of water, when we breathe out, all of they collapse. And when you breathe in again, you get a full quota of oxygen. But if you don't have water there because of dehydration, they don't totally collapse. You can't get a good amount of oxygen, all because of dehydration. I told you his book's a fascinating book. He goes right into the intricacies of the cellular level in the body and shows the effect of dehydration. 75% of upper body weight is held in the lower back by water. The other is held by your ligaments, your tendons. So dehydration can cause lower back pain. It's not the only cause of lower back pain, but it's a big contributing factor. Michael's got a mate who's a bricklayer. And he rang up Michael one day and he said, oh mate, me and all the guys on the job site, our lower back, always paining. And Michael said, well, what do you drink? He said, oh, we all drink Coke. Litres of the stuff. Michael said, well, I've got a challenge for you. Stop the Coke and start the water. He says, oh, as if that would make any difference. He says, try it. Well, they did. He rang up Michael a week later and he said none of the guys had lower back pain anymore. You see that the dehydrating agents in the Coke were, these men were dehydrated. It was felt in their lower back. Your brain cells have a lot of water in them. And when you're dehydrated, those cells shrink and that hurts. So this man started to drink more water. By the end of the week with us, he had no lower back pain. By the end of the week with us, he had no more headaches. So can you see, now that they were gone, there was no need for the painkillers. And his chest was easy. I saw him 6 weeks later, he jumped out of the car and he had this huge bottle of water. He said, I'm drinking 3 litres a day. He said, in 6 weeks I've had no lower back pain, I have had no headache. He said, and my chest is starting to clear more and more. That doesn't clear overnight. What was his problem? Dehydration. And I always think of him when I see Dr. B's book. He's not sick, he's thirsty. Don't treat thirst with medications. Water. Isn't that the first place we should start? Is just water. Cheap medicine. But remember, when you start drinking water, it's also important to have salt. Water is a fascinating thing because that can be used as a liquid. So the liquid is water. It can be used as a solid, and the solid is ice, and it can be used as a gas. And you're getting a little bit of that in your sauna, yeah, when you throw the water on the rocks. So there's your steam. And in the mid-1800s, there was a health retreat in Battle Creek, Michigan, that had something like 1,800 beds. Wouldn't that be wonderful? If this was so big it could take so many people. It was incredibly famous. People from all over the world came here. And the medical director was Dr. Kellogg. You've heard of Dr. Kellogg? Yeah. Kellogg's cornflakes fame. If you knew what was in those Kellogg's cornflakes today, you'd die. And he has written whole textbooks, encyclopedias on hydrotherapy, which is water therapy. And what water therapy does is it uses these things. So I'm going to give you a story to illustrate. I was up in the highlands of, no, I won't give you that story because I didn't have ice. I'll give you the story of a little boy that came to me with a swollen finger. And he'd had a blister, it broke, and he's playing with his Matchbox cars in the dirt, so we're not surprised what happened next. I said to the mother, "What are you doing?" She said, "He's on his second course of antibiotics, he's having painkillers and sleeping tablets to sleep at night, and he's 7. So what I did, I got their permission and I got 2 little cups of water. So what I did was I made one hot, and initially, hot is stimulating. And we know that if you're cold and get into a hot shower, oh, it tingles because it's stimulating. So initially, the hot is stimulating. And it only takes probably 3 minutes, and then the hot becomes, there's a slowing down. And I think, some people even fall asleep in a hot bath, is that right? Mm-hmm. What Dr. Kellogg used to do with psychiatric patients who were going off the deep end, as we say in Australia, he put them in a hot bath. Wow, would that slow them down? And he'd keep them in a hot bath for an hour. And then I put this little boy's finger in cold. Now initially, cold is stimulating. Have you experienced that after your hot shower? Don't worry about doing that. It's stimulating, all right. But it only takes 30 seconds before it, is that right, slows down. So what I did was I put his finger in the hot for how long? 3 minutes. And then in the cold, and it had ice in it. You want it very cold. The cold, you don't have to put ice in the water here, do you? Woo. We did it 3 times. But can you see what we're doing? We're doing stimulating, 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 stimulating. What are we stimulating? Blood. And when you stimulate blood, you're stimulating more nutrition, more water, more white blood cells, and the waste is being taken away. How long did that take? 15 minutes? By the end of it, he had a big smile on his face. What did he just experience? Incredible pain relief. And how long did it take? How long does it take for, what are your painkillers? Advil, is that one? Sometimes it doesn't work at all. It'll take about half an hour for that painkiller to kick in. How long did this take? 15 minutes. Just incredible. And then I put a grated potato poultice on it. And when they got home, the little boy said, "Mum, can we do that again?" Why did he say that? He got relief. So we did it 10 in the morning. They did it 2 in the afternoon. Changed the poultice because that poultice is pulling in a lot of waste into it. Did it again, after his shower, maybe 7 o'clock at night. And then in the morning, she said when they took that poultice off, the finger was totally back to normal. Every time they changed it, they could see it going down, and the poultice had pulled all the waste out. No need for painkillers, no need for sleeping tablets, and no need for the other one. Mm-hmm. She said, "What will I do with the medication?" I said, "I have no authority over that medication, but I'll leave it up to you. I can tell you what I would do, but I think you already know." So I raised all my children with lots of little aches and pains for various things with the poultices and the simple hot detox. Such a powerful thing. I've just touched on it. We could spend a month on it. In fact, initially, nurses in the 1950s learned hydrotherapy, but it's labour intensive, so unfortunately they don't do that anymore. But it's such a simple thing. And when I was in Alabama last year, I got chiggers. You know chiggers?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And I knew that if I scratched it, what's going to happen?
That made it worse. It's inflamed.
So every time I'd get an itch, I'd just get a block of ice, freeze it, freeze it. And before I went to bed at night, I had about 6, I'd get a block of ice, take me about 10 minutes, freeze, freeze. I went over them all and totally froze them and slept all night. And I found that I only had to do it maybe 3 times a day. People forget the wonders of ice for itch, just kills it. You scratch an itch, you're going to irritate the skin, possibly open it, make it 100 times wet. It feels wonderful to scratch. But I can tell you something now, it feels wonderful to put a block of ice on it. Don't forget ice, it's the best anti-inflammatory we have. Great on those swollen things. Takes a while if a person's got chicken pox. Zit, 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 zit. But it can bring relief for several hours. Tomorrow, we're going to headquarters. Tomorrow, we're going to the capital city of the human body, which is the inside workings of the brain. Everything that affects the body affects the brain, and everything that affects the brain affects the body. So that's where we're going tomorrow. And I hear there are a few people coming to join us. Our numbers will swell, so we're going to move over to the chapel. What time's tomorrow do we start? Does anyone know? I think it's 9:30. I think it's 9:30, so you've got a little bit more time tomorrow. So I look forward to seeing you then, but
Aren't we seeing you tonight?
those, oh yes, yes, we're going to have a meeting tonight. I'm going to give a story tonight. In the evening, you just want a story about how I became, or how I came into the health world. Okay. And we're finishing all the consultations today. I think, does everyone know their times? So I shall move over now, and I just wanted to tell